Goirand. I'm a consultant coach, and one of my field of interest is the body, the role of the body in organization and especially at work. And a lot of people ask me, what is embodiment, especially non-native English speakers, because we don't have that word embodiment in all other languages, in Latin languages, for example. So let me give you 4 definitions that I'm borrowing from ideas that seem to resonate in my field with the colleagues that I respect very much. So number 1, embodiment is the way we appear in the world, the way we show up, is the way we are. We are not holograms, we are bodies, and we all have a singular embodiment that makes us particular individuals and recognizable individuals. So that embodiment, you have an embodiment, I have an embodiment, is rooted first in the fact that we are humans and we are not animals. I mean, animals have a particular embodiment, and in the animal kingdom, the embodiment of a cat is different from that of a goat or that of a bear, right? And same thing with human beings. As human beings, we have an embodiment with some rules that shape, who we are and how we show up. But also that our embodiment is rooted in our culture. Whether you're Japanese, French, or Russian, very different ways to behave and act and interact. But one of the main ground for our embodiment is our personal history, our emotional history going back to our childhood. It also changes depending on the context, whether you're in a hierarchical relationship, for example, different embodiment, and depending on the situation and the environment, there again, that shapes your embodiment. So that's one aspect. But also concepts, everything that relates to human beings, human feelings, human values, human capacities, they all have their singular embodiment, shape. Let's take some example. Feelings, for example. There's an embodiment, very obvious, of fear, of sadness, of excitation, of anger, and we know that in theater, of course, it's a big major scene, for embodiment, where our bodies really speak to us. But we also have an embodiment of human capacities. For example, I'm interested in leadership very much. And so there's an embodiment of leadership. That's what I study. So how does it show when you are inclusive compared to defensive? When you're able to listen without taking things personally, being neutral, there's an embodiment of that. There's an embodiment of the capacity to take a stand, make a decision, and speak up for what is important. And you can basically study also generosity, confidence. Each aspect of human behavior has its own embodiment. It's a very rich aspect of embodiment. Number 2, embodiment is also a scientific field that studies the body in its role, articulation with behavior and cognitive capacity. There's the term embodied cognitive science, and that field is the crossroad or mixes various other science, human science, like neuroscience, of course, but also biology, psychology, sociology, etc. Third aspect of embodiment, it's kind of a field. And that field is that of all the techniques and disciplines that involve the body, especially the subjective body, for all sorts of ends, whether it's for healing, whether it's to develop particular capacities, for example, to increase your confidence, or to be able to deal with stress differently, or to be able to be in relationship in a more smooth way, right? Those are very focused goals, and they each have, their own embodiment ensemble of techniques and practices, but also the end to develop yourself as a human being, to be more fully yourself, to be more your bigger self, to have access to all your resources. And what's amazing is that that field that's always been there is now kind of coming together. To give you an example, in October there was this amazing embodiment conference where there was 1,000 speakers. 1,000 speakers, imagine that, coming from all the different realms of embodiment. So let's name a few. People coming from the martial arts, the arts of movement, the arts, dance, voice work, theater, improvisation, people coming from the embodied psychotherapies, the body-mind psychotherapies, people coming from the old tradition, whether it's yoga or qigong, people coming from the world of meditation, and I forgot some, and if you are interested, put the question below and I'll do a kind of a representation of that whole field. And what I find very interesting and very new is that all those disciplines are not exclusive of one another. Actually, they're all supporting one another as a practitioner. You can practice 2, 3, 4 of them. It makes only your practice richer, and it supports your movement toward being a more integrated human being and having a richer access to your true nature. And that is amazing. And in a way, that field is also a movement. And that is the fourth aspect of embodiment that I would like to underline. Embodiment as a movement. Our relationship to our body really shapes our relationship to the outer world, our representation of it, and the way we interact with others and with nature. So far, of course, what we know very well is that the main narrative has been one of separation, right? The separation of the head with the rest of the body, and it's a top-down power relationship with the imagining that the head is commanding to the rest of the body as if it was a real. It is not, but it's a fiction. But that's the fiction we've bought in, right? As a civilization, and that creates all sorts of dynamic, in the society. Of course, it creates fragmentation. It creates hierarchies. It creates rivalries and competition. It creates exploitation, and with all the consequences that we see are arising, and they're very manifest, of course, these days, more and more. So opposite to that field is co-creating a different narrative that comes from the experience itself of being a body, being embodied. The body is naturally an integrator and a connector. You cannot imagine the liver, for example, saying, I am more important than the lungs, and as a result, I need to have more resources than you, and or have power over you, right? That would be a kind of funny science fiction book, or bad science fiction. So it gives you this experience of collective intelligence and cooperations, 24 hours a day. And that, of course, that experience, changes the way you see the world. Also, it's not only a connector with ourselves, with our different parts, the good and the bad, but it leads us to a different connection to other people and to nature. I have my hills behind, right? And there's just a landscape, but a real embodied connection with nature is something that shapes and transforms the way you operate in the world. We all know that. And when you embark in this journey in embodiment, one day or another, you're going to hit, or you're going to have that opportunity to really strongly experience that shift. So I find it also particularly interesting to notice that the body is not only an integrator, not only a connector, but it's also a transmitter, a resonator, right? And as such, it opens the possibility for a different heightened sensitivity and of different forms of intelligence. And that's exactly the kind of resources that we need to deal with the issues that we collectively need to handle, the complexity that we need to handle these days. So embodiment is really here to stay. If it's coming now, it's not by chance. It's because we need it. And the other reason why this field is so strong is because it's really not artificial. It resonates with who we are, with our true nature. And it really contrasts with other scenarios that are being written that entrust our future to machines, to programs, artificial programs, and to people who treat each other and maybe themselves as machines and as programs. So I encourage you to dig in that field, not from an intellectual point of view, that would be really a nonsense, but through the experience. There are many doors. I put some resources down here. Leadership Embodiment is a great door, but they're all good. And as I said earlier, you can start with one and then you'll meet another on the way. Enjoy.